Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I specifically want to talk about how Frank Herbert in 1967 perfectly predicted the power that would emerge from Dungeons and Dragons in Dune, and how Frank Herbert pointed at the narrative changes, the massive ramifications of the narrative changes that would occur with Dungeons and Dragons. Okay. So Dungeons and Dragons came out in 1974. Dune came out in 1967. But I am convinced that when Frank Herbert was writing Dune, he was writing about Dungeons and Dragons 7 years before it occurred. He didn't know what it would be named, but he definitely knew it was coming. And the reason why is the American narrative eclipse. So Frank Herbert was writing fiction in 1967, and I think he understood that Dune would be the Dune book would be essentially created by the death spasms of the American author, and subsequently authors in every other American authors are really American authors are the most important, powerful, most relevant authors in the world. Virtually nothing that gets written anywhere else has anywhere near the magnitude of even B-tier American authors, right? Like, it's just, what happens in America determines the path of the rest of the world 20 years later. It's just the reality of how the world works. There's no country in the world that's leading anything of significance beyond America. I wish it was true. South Korea is doing great choreography. Again, is that super relevant? Is it helpful? No. Like every major problem in the world is solved by America, and then every other country in the world just picks up whatever America did 2 decades later. There's nobody in the world leading anything, right? So we're leading everything, right? Everything of relevance. South Korea is leading in choreography and dance. All right. So he knew that Dune would be the last book of significance that would come out. Now, we are still getting novels today that are very good. Why is that if authors are dead? Well, it's the chicken with the head cut off, right? The head's been cut off. Authordom is truly fully dead. Nothing being written today is of significance because those stories don't have any significance. Why? Because there's only one storyteller today that matters. Only one. Only one storyteller today that is saying anything personal. Right? One of the reasons why authors are dead is they scribble out whatever they want. Maybe an editor looks at it and then they plop it out for 1 million people, right? It's not personal. It's not valuable. It's not relevant. It's not significant because authordom is dead. It is an antiquated communication method, okay? But but Frank knew that there was that while the author was going to die, that vacuum would be filled, and it has been filled. By what? Frank Herbert told us. By the Lisan al-Gaib. Okay? So Paul, Muad'Dib, Atreides. Okay? Muad'Dib Usul. What is Paul, Muad'Dib, Atreides in Dune? He is the Lisan al-Gaib. What is the Lisan al-Gaib? Well, what do the words mean? The words Lisan al-Gaib mean voice from the outer world. The voice from the outer world. So what was Frank Herbert talking about with the Lisan al-Gaib? He was pointing to the rise of the Dungeon Master. He didn't know it would be called the Dungeon Master because it was 1967. But he knew that the author was dead. He knew he was writing the last novel of significance. He knew it. He knew that Dune would be the death spasms of the American author, right? And that their work would fall into irrelevancy immediately, which it has. So who is the voice of the outer world? The Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master is the voice of the outer world, right? We speak from outside the world, right? Who speaks from within the world? The Dragon Masters. The red, the white, the blue, the black, the green, the Dragon Masters. Those who have signed the personal contract, the player character sheet, they've made a promise to the Dungeon Master. They've made a promise to every other Dragon Master. The Dragon Masters are the players. When I say Dragon Master, I mean Dungeons and Dragons player. It's Dungeons and Dragons player is not an appropriate term in my humble opinion. It's too small. It doesn't fit. It's not appropriate. The correct term is Dragon Master. Okay. So the Dragon Masters, they are the voice of the inner world. When they speak with their player character, right? Actually, so these Dragon Masters have signed the contract, right? The most important contract anyone will ever sign in this world, right? The most important contract, right? A contract, they're promising the Dungeon Master, they're promising every other Dragon Master, they're promising themselves, and they're promising the player character to bring life, to be a catalyst, to lift everybody at the table up, to be more themselves, to make sure that the player character is fully manifested. And then when they sign the contract, which is the player character sheet, in my humble opinion, all right, the Dungeons and Dragons player character sheet, and then they move forward, and what do? They speak in the voice of their player character. Where are their player characters speaking from? They're speaking from the inner world. What are the inner worlds? Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, and Dragonlance, right? What are the inner worlds? Where are the Dragon Masters speaking from? When they speak in character, they're speaking from Strixhaven, they're speaking from Ravnos, they're speaking from Theros, right? They're speaking from Dark Sun, they're speaking from Ravenloft. They are the voice of the inner world. Who is the voice of the outer world? The Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master is the Lisan al-Gaib. We are the voice of the outer world. We speak, and what we do and what we speak determines the shape of the world. We determine the fate of everyone, just like the Lisan al-Gaib. Paul, Muad'Dib, Atreides determine the fate of the Empire and the Fremen. We determine the fate of everyone, the player characters and the non-player characters, exactly like Paul, Muad'Dib, Atreides. The Dungeon Master is the Lisan al-Gaib. We are the one that everyone listens to. We are the one that leads the way. The Lisan al-Gaib leads the way. Muad'Dib leads the way. Stilgar said it. But Stilgar said it because Frank Herbert was predicting perfectly the actual power of Dungeons and Dragons. The Lisan al-Gaib is the Dungeon Master, pointed at in 1967 perfectly by Frank Herbert because he foresaw the death of the American author and the rise of the American Dungeon Master, the one who leads the way, the voice from the outer world that everyone listens to. The Lisan al-Gaib, the one who determines the fate of everyone. The Lisan al-Gaib is the Dungeon Master. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.